March 28th, our year of 2012, and this is Day 9 Daily number 435, where we learn to be a better gamer. Important to note, check this out. Isn't that cool? Yeah, futuristic Paris! The author you can see down in the bottom right, his name is Don't Nod, I think it is, but either ways, I, like many nerds, have the following mantra. I might not be cool, but my desktop background sure as hell is. I've always been interested in the idea of how a nerd defines himself to be cool via the digital space. It's not via my cool outfit, which by the way is a StarCraft 2 man with a gun, but things like my playlist, my desktop background, the rotating camel case I use on my ID in the forums. Ugh! Identity, etc. Screw it. You know what? Let's talk about today's daily topic. We're going to look at a very long, very epic game between Polt from... He's not on... Is he still on TSL? Should be on TSL. I'm going to say TSL Polt. And, of course, Stephano from Team Millennium. A very epic game that was played at the amazing community-run Lone Star Clash by the Rosen brothers, who are outrageously awesome. Them and Tespa put together a fist-pumpingly, Mike Tyson ear-bitingly awesome event. Those are the only adjectives that my brain felt capable of saying right now, so I said them. It was amazing. And this was a game from the grand final. A very long game. It's over 30 minutes long. And in this game, we're going to constantly ask ourselves the following question. And I love this idea so much because this doesn't just help for playing of StarCraft, which I know you and I love doing, but also for watching of StarCraft, which I know you and I both do and think all the time, shit, I really should be playing. But instead I'm just watching good people be good. You know what? Let me just watch another game. Let me just watch another game. Here's the thing that you can think to always make that experience more exciting. Always think, how does this maneuver right now help me for my next step later on? It's a very simple statement, but if you're constantly thinking in terms of next steps, the game becomes so much more exciting to watch. There's so much more going on in your head from that observer point of view. You might see a Ling Infestor attack going on, and all the while, if your brain is racing through all the possibilities that there could be there. If you weren't thinking of that, you'd be saying something like, well, this Ling Infestor attack will probably not work because there is a Colossus there, and that is good against Infestors and Zerglings, so this is bad. However, if you're thinking in terms of the long term, in terms of the next step, you can say something like, this push is helping the Zerg get a new expansion up. You can say, that plane outside is really, really flying low, and I hope it doesn't hit the house. You can say something like, this Ling Infestor tech is helping free up a whole bunch of gas to help get a transition to Hive fairly soon. You can say all these various things. This push is helping deny a third. And as long as you're thinking of that next step all the time, you will realize two things. One, how brilliant the pros are. Two, how not brilliant some of the things that you and I might have been doing are. Because it's so easy to fall into the trap of, aha, I normally win right now, so I'm going to do that. Haha, oh, it didn't work. Oh my god. Holy shit, I have nothing else. Oh my god. It reminds me of this adorable comic of an alien who says a cute pickup line to a girl, and she's like, tee-hee, you're adorable. And the alien goes, I've never gotten this far before. I don't know what to do. And the girl's like, you're cute. And then he starts sweating and he farts, and she's like, tee. And then it like zooms on his face and he's like drenched in sweat. It's like the end of the whole comic. And you never want to be in that position where your attack doesn't work and then suddenly your heart drops into the bottom of your stomach and you think, oh no, I have no idea what I'm doing. Excellent. Let me drink my delicious jar of water. Let me introduce you to my two friends who watch me nonstop while I'm doing the dailies. Aren't they beautiful? And then let's go ahead and do the announcements briefly before we step into the game. On Sunday will be a delayed daily This is, I think, the only delayed daily I've ever done. It's going to be at 8 p.m. Pacific instead of 7 p.m. Pacific. The reasoning is because I am helping my delightful and lovely friend Felicia Day do her subscription drive for Geek and Sundry. I'll be tweeting all over the Twitterverse about that in the next few days, so definitely do check it out. I'll be doing that in the evening time sometime. More confirmation on the times coming up. But of course, I cannot simultaneously be at her casting venue and at my house at the same time. I promise to get a sentry over to hallucinate me as quickly as possible, thereby being able to do both, but until said time, I'll just delay it. And of course, Sunday will be subscriber mono battles. Woo! You know what? I've never done this before, but I'm going to give it a shot. Yes! Yes! Subscriber mono battles will be taking place on Sunday evening, so if you would like to give the voluntary donation of $5 to the Day 9 Daily, though you don't have to, I would be so pleased if you did, and would be delighted to game with you on Sunday. Ha! Now that we've gotten through all that shebang shabazz, let us step into the brilliance of TSL Polt and Millennium Stephano. He is still on TSL, right? He is still on TSL, right? Okay. Okay. Dizzy Day 9 is dizzy. Alright, cool. We have Polt down here in the bottom side. And we have Stephano up here in the top right side. Now, something that I did not say in my let's be honest, my usually overly verbose introductions, one thing I neglected to say was that Stephano is going to be doing somewhat of a unique style in this game. Same with TSL Polt. He is going to be doing somewhat of a unique style. Now, some of you, I would imagine many of you who sit and fantasize about doing your own shows, about how you would structure lessons and tutorials and that sort of thing, would probably want to say something like, why not focus on the unorthodoxy that we're about to see? Shouldn't that be the salient aspect of this matchup? In reality, I would argue, well, it is, but far more important than orthodox or unorthodox is thinking in terms of what is the next step. Throughout all this gameplay, what I'm going to be repeating over and over and over and over and over and over again as a mantra: what is the next step? How does what we're doing now help our next thing? To break it down a little bit, how does this defense help us with our next step? Or how does this attack help us with our next step? Fantastic. Allow me to drink more jar water. Oh, and every few dailies, I just have to do this once. I just have to. Excellent. Excellent. Fantastic. Let's go into the game. So we see Stephano doing a pretty typical maneuver. He is going to be building a hatchery and then building some extra drones. His spawning pool actually goes down quite late. Quite late for your average spawning pool, and this is just because of distances. Obviously, you can get away with building it on, like, say, a 15 hatch and then a 14 pool on a really close spawn position, say in Entombed Valley. On this map, Stephano is a little more comfortable doing a little bit delayed, and you really should. I'm of the opinion that you really should. Now, Polt, as per awesomeness, is going to just take these two Marines and go Overlord hunting. We can clearly see that no pool is done, but almost no matter what, you should be moving this Marine out super early to hunt down this Overlord. If he is not going to be early expanding, if he's going for kind of a fast spawning pool, just be a little more careful with the Marines, but still do a poke. Still, maybe, you might want to wander out to the watchtower and then back home, but especially you beautiful silver and bronzies, or as I like to call them, not master yet players. I want you to get in the habit of just sending those Marines out. Nothing wrong with moving out and pulling back again. As a matter of fact, if you don't move out and pull back all the damn time, something's going wrong. Something's going wrong. Delicious. And looks like we're going to see TSL Polt do the usual swap-a-ruha as you go for the double Hellion play. Excellent. We see Stephano going for the Spine Crawler and, of course, the double Queen play. He's getting Zergling speed up. This is a pretty reasonable juncture to stop and do some analysis. It's also a good juncture for me to stop and make sure that I popped up on Team Liquid. Excellent, I did. Here is a very typical position where we find ourselves in. I said later on in the game we're going to see some unorthodox styles from both of them, but right now we see a Zerg expanding and building drones, we see a Terran building Hellions and expanding. That is as orthodox as it comes, but still we want to step into the shoes of how does right now help us for our next step. In a very obvious sense, these Hellions will help us defend against any sort of Zergling attack. Excellent. How will that help us for the next step? It helps us get our command center and our upgrades up if we can defend against early Zergling pressure. Easy. Likewise, the Zerg player, this defense with the Spine Crawler and the Queens and the Zergling speed, this helps us with our next step of, well, we want our Queens to help us drone. We want, I'm actually going to ignore the Spine Crawler. We want the Zergling speed to be able to do things like wrap around and kill Hellions. And great, we're in good shape. Everything I've said right now is as orthodox as it comes. It is the most normal thing in the world. Take a shot, Day 9 drinking game players. The most normal thing in the world is what I've just described. However, everything I just said is a little bit too focused on the right now. It's a little bit too focused on the right now. This Queen and this Spine Crawler is going to help us stay alive so that we can get drones up. That's a little too right now focused. These Hellions are going to help us kill or defend against Zerglings so we can get our expansion up. That's a little bit too right now focused. I want to go a little bit farther. The farther ahead you can think, and I don't mean in a game, I mean in terms of your plan. The farther ahead your plan has prepared you, the better. Here's what I'm talking about. These reactor Hellions will help us in the right now to defend against things, in the little bit from now in terms of helping defend this expansion and getting map control, but in particular, this reactor will be used later for when we really need to ramp up Marine productions. We could defend against Hellions now with 2 Spine Crawlers, with 4 Queens. However, this Zergling speed upgrade is going to help us a hell of a lot more later. Hell of a lot more later. Oh, I love jar water. God, I love just the best jar water ever. This helps a little bit more into the future. We're going to be doing that a hell of a lot. Da-da-da-bum, starting fairly soon. Here's a very typical formation that we will see cropping up. The Tech Lab Barracks, the Reactored Factory, and we see the good old Hellions cropping up. And we see Stim. Aw, yeah. Stim is obviously a good upgrade to have in general, but this play with all the Hellions helping give us map control and the fact that we're starting Stim now will all help us when we do a drop play later. And I'm not going to belabor this do it now, helps out later point too much, but I figure that's all I want to state for now, so that way we can just sort of step into some of the cool aspects of the game. Now, in terms of already seeming somewhat unique, Polt is not doing the swap back on the factory. He's actually getting 6 Hellions instead of 4. If you get 4 Hellions, ordinarily we see an instant swap, and we see a barracks on the reactor for double Marine. We see the factory on the Tech Lab for tank production. This is what MVP does, and it's very good on smaller maps like Shattered Temple, like Entombed Valley. On bigger maps like this, map control focus plays are much stronger for a Terran player. Getting things like 6 Hellions, very, very, very map control-ish. Also, going for faster medevacs, very, very map control-ish. And of course, we want all this stuff to line up nicely with this stim pack. That's just good timing. TSL Polt takes the expand. Stephano continues to push back. And Stephano does this very nifty thing where he gets one geyser kind of early for speed, and then he goes double geyser, double Evo chamber, and he's going to be playing fairly passively. The third queen is actually a pretty important component to Stephano's build. We've talked a lot about Polt. I think all I want to say about Polt for the next little bit of time is that as he's getting this expansion up and getting his second gas up, he's just going for stim, a big amount of barracks, and very fast starport. The Hellions are everything to the next 2 minutes of play. Aw, yeah. So we see Stephano going for his kind of unusual +1/+1 style. Stephano generally says, I delay my layer just to be safe. And if I'm delaying my layer to be safe, I may as well get these 1/1 ups started fairly early. Stephano's going to build as few lings as he humanly possibly can, and I think it's important not to try to surround these Hellions too much. It's actually very important not to try to go and wrap around and do that sort of thing, because you're not really going to get the biggest chance to get that surround. The more important things to do are to, say, build a hatchery here and advance the spine crawler. Hell, build a hatchery here. There was this really funny diagram of the way Mondragon plays Zerg vs Protoss, where no matter what the Protoss is doing, he builds a roach. But the way he counters Phoenix is with hatcheries, because you can't lift buildings. Kind of the same thing against Hellions. In a lot of map control plays, they're good at units, but they're not good at buildings, which is making the frickin' building there is an excellent option. Yeah, there's Stephano making another frickin' building. Now, I do want to know, many of you are going to be asking, well, what if Stephano gets all-in really hard with mass Hellions? Won't he have trouble? He does a lot. I'm going to just totally ignore it. I'm literally going to ignore it a lot for just this game. In general, you can try to slip a ling by. There are ways of suiciding overlords in at strategic times, especially if you have placement like this, just to get a good sense of what's up, where you no doubt will get a pretty comfortable coverage. But Stephano is very responsible about pretty much staying on 2 geysers, these are the 2, until he starts his layer tech, and that's when he starts mining out of any more than 2. So you see here where it says, whoopsie daisies. Oh, you hear that beep? That's not your Skype, that is my Skype going off. Excellent. Any more than, or too much gas, I think, is a real issue that many Zergy buddies will struggle with. So easy to get into that, holy crap, I'm going to get my Mutalisks. I have to get my Mutalisks as quickly as possible. I have to get Baelings and Baeling speed and upgrades. And you end up with one of these stupid situations where you have no minerals and 800 gas, and you're like, when they're Mutalisks, I'll be powerful. And that's a big drag. You want to be at about 0-0 all the time. Stephano delays gas a lot with this style. Fantastic. What I want to do is, before we step onto the break, I want to just note this. How does what we're doing right now help set us up for later? So, a big thing that we're seeing Stephano do is he's building a good amount of Zerglings to do some sort of defense. This helps us in the right now for defense against Hellions and other sorts of things. It will help against this defense against drop. But for the very much later, we're soon enough going to be getting 2/2 upgrades. And this is a pretty simple connection. If I'm spending all my gas on Zergling upgrades now and spending my minerals on Zerglings, I'm literally going for a big Zergling army as my main damage-dealing force. So great, these Zerglings help me right now, and later, as my upgrades finish up and I get a bigger Zergling army, it's going to help me then. I'm literally just starting to build up the army I want now for later. That seems really obvious. I'm upgrading Zerglings, so I help build Zerglings now for defense, and it helps me later when I have a bigger Zergling army. That's great. It's the converse of that, the opposite situation that people mess up a ton, where they'll for instance see a lot of Hellions and they'll say, oh, let me build Roaches because Roaches counter Hellions and counter Marines in small numbers. And then what happens is they're still getting the Zergling upgrades because they want to be Stephano. But notice that disconnect. The Hellions are good, or the Roaches are good right now against the Hellions, but they're not going to be useful later. They're not going to be good in a next step. If we're researching +1 Zergling attack and +1 Zergling armor. Sure, if we were getting the range upgrade and going for Roach speed, building Roaches now for defense would be great later on. This is where the disconnect happens. Or even people who build too many Zerglings against Protoss early on when they want to transition into Roach Hydra. There's a disconnect between now and later. So it obviously seems to make sense, in this case, build Zerglings now, because we're upgrading them and we'll want to be building them later. But just make sure you don't fall into the opposites trap. And likewise, this harassment with the Hellions in the now helped position ourselves for this harass later. What does this help us do now? Well, we're going to be doing an attack with drops being annoying and aggressive and harassing our opponent. How will that help us? In the later, it helps us set up an expansion. It helps us flesh out all the rest of our tech structures, factories, engineering bays, so on and so forth. Again, this attack should help you for something later. Don't fall into the trap of, I'm going to do this attack, and then afterwards I hope I have a lot of Marines, and then I'll do another attack. See where the issue comes in? So for instance, very often I'll see this poisonous issue where players will begin building a bunch of barracks right now during the attack. And then they'll follow up the attack with just another attack and hope that they both work. But the fact of the matter is, you want to be going for a more long-term, more ultra farther down the road step. Expanding is always good. Getting upgrades is always good. Going for a follow-up attack is generally the sign that you're focusing too much on winning now instead of later. So, we are 8 minutes into the game. Let's take a break and step into the mid-game. Aw, yeah, be back in 2 minutes. In 2 minutes. In 2 minutes. In 2 minutes.